CMPRadio.net, the voice of Chester.
Everybody, my name is Donna, also known as Donna Janel, CEO and founder of Parenting with a Purpose. Our strive here at the podcast is to reach every home, whether it's single moms, married, single dads, whatever it is, foster parents, whatever, just bringing the ownership and responsibility and nobility back into parenting. Get comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. All parents need some help and guidance, and I'm just here to be a guide. Hey everybody, welcome to Parenting with Purpose. I am your host, the one and only Donna Janel. Thank you guys for joining us back here on every Thursday at 7 p.m. We certainly appreciate you guys tuning in to Parenting with a Purpose, where we aim to bring back the beauty, nobility, and responsibility back into parenting. As y'all know, parenting is not for the weak. It is, it doesn't come with a book. Parenting is very diverse. It's, all nationalities, ages, genders, you name it, it's pretty much, parenting is almost like a melting pot. Everything is in the mix, right? So with that, there's not a book for it. There's a lot of people that try to write books on parenting, but each kid is unique, each parent is unique. So here at Parenting with a Purpose, we are aimed to try to bring back some of that beauty, that nobility, and responsibility, because right now that there's a lot going on with our kids, and all you hear is, where's the parents at? What's going on with the parents? They're not just what's going on with the child, it's what's going on with the parents. Like, for example, if you hear something going on about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, the first thing they say is, well, how was those kids outside? Where were the parents at, right? So here at Parenting with a Purpose, you know that parents are the bows and our children are the arrows, and they're going to land wherever we send them. They may not land right now, they may not land tomorrow, next week, even years to come. It may take a long time for them to land where you want them to go, but they will land there. If you keep giving them the tools, if you keep pushing them, you keep, working with them and being patient with them and giving them some grace to grow, right? Parenting is, we have to give our children some grace to grow, all right? So as you know, I deem September as Education Month. Since most of the children are going back to school, I thought it would be a good idea to have educators on here, whoever's in the school district, because I believe that parents and educators should partner for our children to be successful, right? Last week we had a teacher on here, Miss Kaya Gould, and she was explaining to us, the dynamics of her classroom, the certain things that she dealt with in the classroom. And one of the things that she was saying was it kind of was a challenge to communicate with the parents, because a lot of times parents, we kind of don't see no wrong in our children, or sometimes depending on what we are in our own mind, may not even seek help or want help or know how to get help. So that's what Parenting Purpose is. I'm trying to bring everybody in so that for the success of our children. We know it takes a village to raise a child, and we know parents ourselves, we need a village, right? So I just think that we all need to come together and be on one accord for the success of our children. So tonight, guests, I went deep, y'all. Tonight we got a good guest here. Most of my guests are great, but Dr. Pugh is in the house. I have a long resume for Dr. Pugh, but we're not going to break it all up tonight. We're going to let Dr. Pugh let you know what he got going on and some of his credentials, what qualifies him to speak and what qualifies him to know. We know that we have 17 years in education, I think 17 plus years in education. Welcome to the show, Dr. Pugh.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad that you accepted the invite, because I thought it was awesome that once I read your resume of all the things that you were involved in, from teacher, counselor, principal, central office, like everything that encompasses education. So I think that you have some valuable information that could kind of help us, especially our most of our audience is this is a black show pretty much. It's open to everybody, but we're in the city of Chester. We're also not too far from Philadelphia. We're also not too far from Wilmington. So we're surrounded by cities, and most of our cities have African American people in there. So that's kind of where we're trying to gear our audience to make us better people. Because if we don't help each other, nobody else is going to help us, right?
Yes.
All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm a proud resident of Philadelphia. Went to Overbrook High School. I graduated class of '99. There I played baseball, in which I went to college to play college baseball at Greensboro College in North Carolina. Pretty much, went through college, got my undergrad in political science and minored in sociology. I had an opportunity to play overseas for a year over in Stockholm, Sweden.
Baseball?
For baseball, yes.
Okay.
So after that, I became a teacher, became a fifth grade teacher. I fell in love with it. As a result, I never went back. I think teaching was my calling at the time, so in my regards, I just felt like I owed it to give back to, the community. So
Okay.
became a teacher. I was a teacher for about a good 10 years in a variety of settings. I was a special ed teacher most of my teaching career. I had a heart for, students with disabilities.
Okay.
There I became a school counselor because, I wanted to kind of broaden my horizons in regards to just seeing a different aspect of education. So I became a school counselor for 4 years in Delaware.
Okay.
And I fell in love with that as well. So I just wanted to kind of see it from a different lens. After that, I became a central administrator in Chester Upland School District for a few years. So I was the director of their student services for a couple of years. And then I went back to Delaware, became an assistant principal. But Chester, is very fond of my heart, so I decided to come back and became a principal in Chester Community Charter School. So I've been there for the last 4 years now. So I enjoy, working with our families, our students. I just love the city of Chester.
Okay, well, that's good to know. We do love the city of Chester too. I'm born and raised in Chester, moved out, but I'm constantly coming back because home is where the heart is. You got to come back and give to people who've given so much for me, being born and raised here. For people who've given so much to me, I feel like I owe it back to the community to give back to them. And besides, I think that once you grow up and you become quote unquote successful or different than you have been, it's good to bring back your information to help others in the community to also rise as well.
I agree.
So we're gonna go back to your teacher days first.
Okay.
Teaching. So one of the biggest things that I really want to hone in on is like how important for a teacher to partner with parents. Like we'll do that aspect first. We'll start with the teacher.
Okay.
Like how important that relationship, the dynamic of that relationship is so important for the success of our children. How do you feel about parents and teachers and just the communication?
Well, I think the good teachers build that rapport immediately. So they find ways to welcome those parents into their classrooms. I think the main thing that you always want to do is you want to make sure that your parents feel welcome in your classrooms. When I was a teacher, I always kept an open door policy because our parents are our partners. So as a result, it's important that they have that opportunity to communicate with you at any given moment because, they're entrusting their children to you for 8 hours a day.
Right.
So, or 6.5, $7 a day. But, you're married to them for 10 months of the school year. So it's important that, you have that bond with those parents because they're entrusting their kids with you.
Right.
So I think relationships is vital, especially with a parent and teacher relationship, because the child is watching that dynamic.
Yeah.
So as a result, if the kids feel that there isn't a relationship or a bond between teacher and parent, then kids will tend to play off of that. And as a result, that relationship can tend to be broken at times. So it's important that you are building that rapport with parents and being transparent with them, but also asking them how we can support you outside of the building. So it's important that we
I like that. Because I didn't even think about the fact that our children are watching how we communicate with one another.
Absolutely. It's important because, I've seen kids, if a parent is upset with a teacher, a kid will run with that. And as a result, they may exhibit behaviors in their classrooms. And if a teacher's calling the parent and the parent and the teacher are not on the same page, then that creates a dynamic where the kid feels that they can overtake your classroom.
Right. Oh, wow. So sometimes, parents, y'all hear that? Because sometimes, I don't think we look at that, like, because sometimes as parents, like, if there's a situation and then, if you're not the type of parent that seek first to understand versus to be understood, like, if you're a parent that's hot-headed or that's all you know, and you just kind of like, what you say to my kid, or you fly off the handle, and then children see that communication, and then it kind of empowers them to be able to say what they want to say. Yes. I'll call my mama type stuff, right?
Exactly. I've seen some examples of that. That's why it's important that, you're communicating with parents at least once a week. Whether it's a bad phone call or a good phone call, you should always maintain that communication with your parents. I try to as a principal, I try to tell staff, it's important that you give at least 4 good phone calls before that one bad phone call. Therefore, you have already built that rapport with your parent, and that they can trust that you're being transparent with them.
Right. I like that. You made a good point earlier, and I thought about this. Something I wrote years ago. It was about how long our children are in school, right? So, it's 24 hours a day, right? 24 hours in a day. But our children are in school for about 7 to 8 hours. So school have our children active hours more than the parents, right?
Yes.
So, because when we wake up in the morning, we're getting our kids ready for breakfast. We're ready to go to work, So we got a good, probably like an hour. And then we drop them off at school. So they're there for about 8 hours. We pick them up. If they got extracurricular activities, we're running them to the activities. Yes. And then we're cooking dinner, getting dinner ready. Then it's bedtime. And then it's bath and it's bed, right? So our hours as a parent, most of our active hours are on the weekend, right?
Right.
So, but that's 5 days straight that our children are in school, and those hours that they're active, where they're absorbing things, are in school. So I thought about, I was like, wow, why wouldn't we want the communication to be top notch? Because you guys have our kids all day.
Absolutely.
Like, you have them like in the best time, like the best moments where they're up, they're alert, they're listening. Yes. And you guys are able to pour into them. So I think that a lot of parents don't realize that the active hours of a daily is at school.
Absolutely, and those are, like you said, those hours are vital to a child's development. So when we do have our kids in our buildings, it's important that we are nurturing them and realizing their potential. Because like you said, we got them at the best time of the day for those hours. And we need to capitalize on when they do show up to school, because if, we're not capitalizing on those opportunities, then we're really not developing our kids.
Right. So when you're communicating with parents, do you find it, like, say if I have one of my children, they're having trouble at home, something's going on at home, and I shoot an email and say, hey, such and such didn't sleep last night because of A, B, and C. Like, do you, as a teacher, as a principal, as an educator, do you appreciate those emails that, even though it's not inside the classroom, this is outside the classroom?
Absolutely. I think the more that parents give a teacher or even an administrator information-wise is important. Like you said, if a parent brings their kid and says, he had a rough night, he was up all night, or there was something that occurred in the neighborhood, something where you give us vital information that we can really support the parent. I always try to tell parents, just be transparent. Like, if we notice kids are exhibiting behaviors, and we know that there's more to the situation that we're not getting, I try to at least bring the parents in and say, listen, like, let's be on the same page here. We're here to support your child. Is there anything that we can do as a school to support you outside of school? Sometimes parents are transparent if they feel that they can trust that the information they're giving, is kept in confidence.
Right.
But, I do appreciate my parents, because I try to be transparent with them and say, listen, like, if your child needs to sleep the first hour a day,
right.
we can bend, we can be flexible, but you got to give us the information that we need to support you. So I think if parents give that information,
Right.
and if they feel that they can trust that information, I think you can see a better outcomes with their kids.
Do you find it difficult for parents to actually be transparent and share the information?
It goes back to the trust again. If you have to build that relationship.
Right.
If you have not built that relationship, they're not going to be as transparent as you want them to be,
Right.
or they may be on the defensive. So that's like going back to what we mentioned earlier about building rapport. It's important that you start that rapport early, an early part of the school year,
Right.
and just call parents and just say, hey, how's everything going? Is there anything you need? I think parents will appreciate that. The more that you show that you're supporting them,
Right.
then they will be more willing to give you information that's going to support their child at school.
I like that because it's not just about the child, it's the whole family dynamics. It's like, we're here working with your child, we're going to support your child, but in order to support your child, we have to support you.
Yes, I look at parent child school as a partnership.
Right.
Because and my mindset has always been built on customer service. You're my customer. I need, how can I support my customers for their children to be successful? Because when they bring their kids there, they are our customers. So as teaching professionals, we have to go in that mindset of that these are our customers. The parents are our customers as well.
Right.
And we have to make sure that we are doing our best to provide that customer service.
Right. I think it's so unique and different. I don't know if I'm gonna say unique, but trying to figure out the right word to use. When we work with children, like we work with their parents too, because I'm a pediatric nurse. So, I got little kids who have to trust me. I got their parents who have
Yeah.
to trust me, right?
Exactly.
So it's the same thing when it comes to education system for our children. It's like it's such a teamwork because for the success of the child, like if your child see that you trust me, they begin to trust me.
I totally believe that because, like you just mentioned, that trust. I have kids that will come to me, say, Dr. Pugh, I need to talk to you because they trust me,
Right.
and they're willing to open themselves up and tell you what's wrong. And I try to give them tools to support them. If parents say, I need some, we're having difficulties at home, what should the school do to support us?
Right.
And I try to do my best to include the right resources. Maybe the counselor may need to be involved. Maybe we need to, put in a social work referral to get some outside supports. If they're experiencing homelessness, try to make sure that I bring them to the right avenues, to resources. So I try to give them as much resources as I can, based on what I can control.
I find sometimes I think dealing with our population, our colored people, it's more of like what goes on in the house stays in the house type
Right.
thing. That's how I grew up.
Sure.
I graduated '98, a little year younger than you, older than you. But a lot of times it's what goes on in the house stays in the house. So it's really hard for the school to be able to assist if they don't know. Like how can we make parents more comfortable, like say if we're dealing with homelessness, right? And that we're not trying to get your kids taken away.
Right.
Right. Because that's a fear of people,
Absolutely.
It's like, all right, if I tell you this information, you're going to use this information against me, and then it's pretty much all hell is going to break loose, right?
Yeah.
So how do we get parents to a place to understand that we're a team? I want to help you. Like, I don't want to hurt you.
Again, it goes back to that trust. So, one of my formulas that I try to do with parents is just I'll try to bring them to my office and say, let's have a conversation. If they're returning parents, then they typically will be more open to giving you information. But if these are new parents that are brand new to the building or to the district, you probably want to start with just opening up that door of saying, how can we support you at school? And then, how are things at home with your child? If they, they start giving you a little more information, then you can say, okay, if you're experiencing homelessness, like, okay, we do have resources here. We can direct you to this resource. So it's just kind of just making sure that you're following through on what you're saying you're going to do for those parents. Because I think parents sometimes will give you information, then they're going to say, what are you going to do to support me?
Right.
So it's about the follow through as well on the school end to come up with those resources and show that you're trying to do your best to follow through.
Yeah, I think that's good because I think that's a lot of parents have a lot of fear, and just fear from generational fear,
Yeah.
into when it goes into our kids, and then our kids are afraid to even speak up or anything like that. So I like that. I like the fact that you're like, listen, how do we support you at school first? Like, kind of take it one step so that you can build that trust, and trust is built over time.
Right.
But you guys only got 10 months to try to get this.
Sure. And that's the tough part. That's the tough part. You only have them for 10 months, but you try to make those 10 months as enjoyable as we can make it. Sometimes it's difficult, but you want to try to make their school experience the best that we can make it.
Right, because I think kids like to go to school though. Like, I feel like, well, I mean, they don't like the school work, like the hard work sometimes. But like, if you look, I recently just saw, everybody just start going back to school. So you start seeing the first day of school pictures, and all the kids are happy and excited, right? They're all happy, excited, got the new clothes, right?
Yes.
So for the first week, they're so excited. But and then even the parents are excited, right, for the first week, and then after that, it's like, all right, I gotta get you up. The kids don't want to get up. But how do we keep them engaged that way? How do we keep them, the parents excited, the children excited? It's like, this is something for your good.
Well, I think you want to make their school experience the best we can make it. Usually they say the worst kids are the ones that always come every day. I enjoy that, because that shows that school is safe.
Right.
It's welcoming. If I notice that kids are out for a couple of days, I'm making phone calls. How's everything? What's going on? Is everything okay at home? Is there anything you need? So I try not to let kids fall through the cracks, because it's important as educators that we don't let our kids fall through the cracks. So if you notice that kids are out for extended periods of time, I tell them, make phone calls. We need to make home visits. We're going to get our kids to school because we want them in our buildings, and we want them to feel safe and welcoming.
Right. I know during COVID was like a major issue
It was.
because a lot of times, like, our kids come to the school for safety. Whatever dynamics going on at home or on the street, like, they feel most safe, and we know the kids during the day are most safe at school. And during COVID, that was so hard because educators weren't able to lay eyes on our children.
You're absolutely right, and I think we're still feeling that even 3 years later, with kids that are starting to trickle back into school on a more consistent basis. But like you said, it was very difficult because you talking to a kid through a screen is a little different than being in a more intimate setting like a classroom. So I think like you said, with COVID, we're still feeling the effects of that. However, the more consistent that we are with making sure kids are coming to school is vital to maintaining that consistency post-COVID.
Right. Now, have you noticed with COVID a change in social skills with our kids?
I think we have. The mental health of our kids is quite different than it was pre-COVID. You see a lot more behavior challenges now because of the fact that kids were at home for 2-3 years consecutively. Right. And I think the little kids, the kindergarten, first grade, second grade kids were the ones that really felt it the most because the fact that they weren't in school on a consistent basis, it has hindered their social skills. So I think now with schools bringing more mental health resources into buildings now has helped with at least curbing that gap that we have with our mental health of students. So the more that we're providing resources for our families right now is very important because at this time, a couple of years ago, kids were in school. Now that they're coming to school more consistently, they have to get back into the routine of coming to school, socializing with friends, and just kind of having that more intimate feel with kids again.
And learning how to sit in a classroom.
Listen, that's probably been the most challenging. When they first came back from COVID, was just learning how to do school all over again.
Right.
Learning the procedures and the processes of the day-to-day of school, was very challenging. I would say maybe about a couple of years ago, as they were coming back. But you still see the effects, though.
You still see it, yeah. I noticed, like, with kids, like, I just noticed the social aspect of it. It's almost like they don't know how to socialize, like, or
Yes.
there's some, maybe that they don't know how to do it effectively or healthy socializing,
Yeah, and that's a good point that you make, because we're still working with kids on just how to interact with each other.
Yeah.
A lot of kids they weren't playing outside, or they weren't being kids, but
Right.
so it's been challenging at the school level to just have kids interact with each other. So
Right.
I think right now with schools bringing in different social skills curriculums, and counselors being more trained in those social skills curriculums has helped with at least showing kids how to appropriately talk to each other,
Right.
how to de-escalate a situation without putting hands on each other.
Right.
Right now we're just trying to just give as many resources as we can to support our kids on the social aspect.
You think it's, I know because there's so many social issues or concerns right now because of post-COVID, does it seem like it's hindering the academic part of it, though?
I would say yes. Like, just going back to what we were just talking about the social piece, is that, right now we're still trying to train kids on how to do school again.
Right.
So, the fact that kids were on a screen for 2-3 years straight
Right.
has widened that academic gap, which has created a lot of frustration with kids. And that social piece, that correlation, has really hindered the academic growth of kids. So we're seeing kids right now with, that's in 5th grade, with kindergarten, 1st grade reading levels now, and it's like, wow, you see the gap, but then it impacts the behavior piece as well. So right now we're doing double work, trying to do the social piece,
Right.
and trying to bridge the gap with their academics. So the correlation has really taken its toll.
What can parents do about it? Like, those years that, even because just parents weren't used to having their kids all day,
Right.
and even having to do education with them all day.
Right.
Especially the younger kids who you had to sit with them kind of to do the computer and things like that. Even though some of these kids can work technology better than some of these adults, but just from their emotional standpoint and their own socials. They're only socializing with kids all day, and most of the time they're frustrated because they're not used to it, right?
Right.
So how can in this post-COVID age, what can parents do to help bridge that, some of those deficiencies?
At this point in time, I would say that parents should be more active in the schools, whether that is participating in PTAs, just finding ways to be more intimate with the buildings now. I think if parents are more active with being in the building, with working with teachers, working with administrators, could be a good start. Also, just asking teachers, what resources can I do to help bridge some of the deficiencies that their kids are having. Asking questions like, should I buy flashcards, or should I look for tutoring services? Also, if kids are really deficient, we look for special education services, where we can develop those IEPs where they can get that more individualized attention. So just asking questions,
Right.
Working with teachers, working with the schools, and just asking because we're the experts.
Right.
And if they're not asking questions, then they're not going to know what to do. So
Right.
I think the more that they ask questions from the experts, like the teachers, the administrators, I think the more resources that we can provide to support them outside of the building.
I think that's good. So ask questions. Parents, ask questions. Ask questions. Since you mentioned IEP, because that's another, in our community, area where we kind of really don't want to touch on, mostly because, the misconception of IEPs is that there's something wrong with my child.
Right.
You know, and God forbid you tell me something wrong with my child. I'm not trying to hear that, because even though he won't sit down at home,
Right.
or, you know, I'm having these challenges at home, but we deal with him the way that our family used to deal with him, right? Not in a school setting. You know, I remember back in the day that before, you know, kids were diagnosed with ADHD, ADD, or any other quote unquote abnormalities, then, you know, I don't believe normal, abnormal. I don't even like that word. You know, we use that a lot in medicine, but normal, abnormal. But before kids were diagnosed with those things, a lot of times they were just considered bad kids.
Well, that's a good point. And I think, you know, as a former special educator, I try to tell parents, you know, an IEP is not a death sentence.
Right.
It's considered a service. So an IEP is more of a service to support with the deficiencies that their child may exhibit. So if it's the behavior piece, you know, an IEP can support with addressing those behavior deficiencies, where we can develop a behavior plan, or if they're exhibiting academics issues, you know, we can develop an individual plan on addressing those deficiencies in that regard. So I always try to tell parents, it's not a death sentence. It's a service that school is mandated to provide, but it also gives them extra resources and extra supports that will help address those deficiencies that their child may exhibit. So I think in our growing up, when we grew up, it was a death sentence.
Yeah.
You know, you were the kid that was down, you know, over there. Now it's more inclusive. You know, students with special needs are more inclusive now. So we don't know who has an IEP, who has an IEP. So I think right now, as we're in 2023, you know, the IEP is more of a service instead of just an exclusive
I think
package.
that's good to know. Like, for parents out there, it's more of a service. I think about, you know, I always relate things back to health because I'm medical. But like, if a doctor gives you a diagnosis, and it's not to say that something's definitely wrong with you, it is how do we get extra resources to you so that you can be successful. So that's what an IEP is called, individual education plan. So what works for that child and whatever setting that child is in is not to harm or to label, you know, the child. And I think, you know, going back to where we grew up, these kids were identified as bad kids, and what bad kids do is bad kids get whoopings. So there was a thing where they thought that they could beat you good, or beat you until you start having some sense, not knowing that them beat was making them lose more sense, right?
I understand, yes.
But now we can look at it as a service, not as a problem. Like, my child's not a problem, but we're just trying to provide extra services so to make that child successful.
Right. So basically, in a nutshell, you know, it just helps bridge the gap of what deficiencies they may have. So again, you know, they can be in a regular classroom, but this, you know, their child may, you know, have some behaviors that needs to be more individualized, and you know, that teacher will know how to support that child and still keep that child inclusive in the classroom. For example, if a student, you know, has ADHD and is classified as ADHD, but they exhibit behavior issues, you know, a behavior support plan could support that child in the classroom. The teacher would know, okay, when this child exhibits this is how we approach it, instead of just going at it like, you know, this child is a problem child, or this child is always doing the wrong thing. It's more individualized. That teacher would know, okay, when Johnny has a moment, this is the strategy, this is how we approach it. Now with that being said, you know, a teacher is more equipped with supporting that child and having that intervention without the actual consequences.
Again, it's all about partnership and teaming, because the main goal is the child. The child is the main goal.
Correct.
So how do we get, you know, this child to be most successful, or whatever? Because success for everybody is different. But for this child, like, for what they're capable of and the things that, how to push them above and beyond where they may see themselves now, it takes partnership.
That's correct. And we want to make sure that, you know, parents are giving that information to us in the building. So, for example, if we're trying to develop an an IEP to support the behaviors that their child may be exhibiting, the more information they can give us, the more that we can pinpoint how to address those deficiencies and how to address the behaviors before it escalates.
Okay. I have a question. So we're talking about we're in the inner city, pretty much. We're surrounded by the inner city, and we know what goes on in the inner city. There's a lot of killing. There's a lot of death. Our kids are around all the time, so there's grief, right? And not even just from death, but from parent separation, from father incarcerated or mother incarcerated. There's so many different areas that our kids are grieving. How do a teacher, most teachers identify like there's something going on with a kid, or like, for example, I'll give you this example. There was a kid a couple years ago who went to school and just wasn't acting the same that they used to act. Like, this kid used to be happy, bubbly, everything, right? But all of a sudden, this kid became very destructive.
Sure.
Ripping up, getting smart with adults, stuff that he's never done. And the teacher was very upset, like, I don't know why he's behaving this way, and calling the parents, yada, 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 and not really trying to figure out what's happened or why did the switch happen. It was just the switch happened and we need to do something about the switch, right? And it turns out what happened was this kid had witnessed 2 deaths that week from somebody in the neighborhood and even their best friend. So this kid was around 9 years old, and actually their best friend died, and then they saw somebody else in the neighborhood die, but nobody said anything to nobody knew, because I mean the parents probably knew, and that's that part of the information given to the teacher, right? But if it's something that they deal with on a daily basis, it's like every time something like that happens, you want to say, hey, so and so just seen somebody got killed, so and so, like, you'll be doing that all day, every day, right? So how do teachers deal with stuff like that, or even administrative educators, because we see it every day all around?
Well, I think when teachers are working in inner cities, they have to have a different lens and know how to pinpoint when there are potential problems. So I think moving forward, with the post-COVID now, we are more trauma-informed as a school. And a lot of districts are moving towards more trauma-informed practices now. So they are equipping us and teachers on having the trauma lens. So when they see kids exhibiting those behaviors, they're not reacting. They're more trauma informed. So they're asking, how can we help you? So they're asking those questions instead of more punitive. It's more trauma informed. And they're also utilizing our counselors in the buildings, and we're actually trying to build more partnerships with parents. So if you do see a kid exhibiting those behaviors, we try to bring parents in and say, listen, we're here to support you. Is there anything that you can give us that we can support your child? And, if parents are more open to say, my child witnessed a couple of deaths, we will have more we'll be more equipped to support the child instead of just being more reactive. So now we're being more trauma-informed in 2023. I think that's good.
Yeah, definitely COVID opened a lot of our eyes to change.
I agree.
The dynamics of things, and the things that our children deal with, and the things that their parents deal with. I mean, just think about, like, the parents were out of work, food was an issue, bills were an issue, and then a lot of times our kids have become issues from that. Because as adults, there aren't a lot of adults that's able to have proper coping skills. So therefore, we can't kind of teach our children coping skills, and that's why things get all chaotic, and why Johnny want to come there and knock somebody's head off.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because a lot of our kids are still learning those tools, how to de-escalate themselves, how to cope with stressful situations. And parents too, parents are still recovering from COVID as well, and we have to take that into consideration as well and have that empathy as well as a school. And, if we're training our parents and supporting our parents with resources as well, because they've been impacted as well, it would go a long way.
Yeah. One of the things that Kaya was on last week, we were talking about, because one of the questions I asked her was, do you think, because remember that at times there was a long time ago before we had this inclusive and no child left behind stuff.
Right.
Remember that?
I remember that.
that no child left behind. Kids were separated, right? So they were in their own, if you were special education, you were in this class and
Right.
everybody knew you were special ed, and, you only can go at not so far because you're only around those people,
Right.
And now it's all inclusive. And do you feel like that was a better move than what keeping kids separate?
I agree. I think inclusion gives an opportunity for both regular education students and special education students the opportunity to collaborate with one another. Everyone's different. Some students have more significant needs that may need a higher level of service, but
Right.
if students with an IEP can perform just as well as a student who doesn't have an IEP,
Right.
They just need that extra support to be successful. So I am a big fan of inclusion. No matter what the child's classified as, it's important that they're included with their same age peers. So I'm a big proponent of inclusion.
I like inclusion too because, those kids who are lower, they have something to reach higher for. Like they can see, we don't want our kids to mimic other kids, but at the same time, if a kid is doing well and another child's like, oh, I want to be
Right.
going to another level, and I think it kind of pushes them over what they thought that they could do.
No, absolutely. Like I said, regular education students and special education students can all learn the same. Sometimes others need a little more than the other kid, but if you put them in situations where they can be successful, they can still be successful in their classrooms.
Right.
They just need a little extra support. And, equipping our teachers with those tools to support students with special needs can go a long way to enhancing those special education students to be successful in their classrooms.
I think that's good. I love inclusion. I think that is like one of the best things, because then it prevents a lot of bullying. It prevents a lot of
And socially, it works for both regular education students and special education students because it shows that empathy factor as well. It builds empathy for kids and kids. I've seen kids, help a kid who may have autism. And they're playing with them and they're including them in games. So I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, I like that. So it's not just include the empathy part that's a skill that we all need too, even as a young child.
It's for kids as well. Absolutely.
To learn that at an early age.
Yes. And the more empathy that a kid can show, then they're going to be successful because they'll have a heart for others as well, and that's a big piece of socializing with others is just having that empathy factor as well.
Okay, all right. So, what was another question I wanted to ask you in regards to? Oh, so we're talking about inclusion in classrooms, and we're talking about equipping teachers, giving them the tools to be able to do it. After speaking with a couple educators. They're struggling with that, right? Like they'll have like 20 kids in the class,
Yes.
and maybe 8 may have IEPs, right? I know last week Kaya was explaining like her situation where she can't get another teacher unless she has 10 IEPs.
Yes, it's a numbers game.
Yeah, it's a numbers game, but it's like, wow. So how can they teach effectively if they're dealing with behavioral issues, IEPs, and it's great to be having an inclusion classroom, but even 8 kids out of 20 with an IEP,
Yes.
and only 1 teacher, like that's very difficult.
It is very difficult. It's definitely difficult. However, good teachers know how to differentiate. Because some of the students, even if they don't have an IEP, may still have those same deficits as a student with an IEP. So you can actually include those students in a small group,
Right.
no matter if they have an IEP or not. If they're having the same deficits, you can just include them in,
Right.
in your groups. Or if you know a student is a visual learner, you might want to have more visuals in your classroom. So I know it's difficult in today's times with trying to have kids with IEPs in your classroom. However, I think the more that you're differentiating lessons, making it more hands-on, making it more tactile, learners can, be over here. You may have visual learners over here. You just kind of have to know your class dynamic.
Okay.
And we have a lot of young teachers coming in the profession. So that, yes, you're right. They may not be as equipped with those tools. That's where the support from your administrators
Right.
and using your other veteran teachers to support with setting up your classroom. So
Okay.
I think using the resources that you have in the building could at least be a start.
Right.
Now, you might have a couple of kids who we just
It might be 20 kids, no
Yeah.
IEP, but they all need IEPs.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of kids probably fall on the same lines.
Right.
You just, no matter if they have an IEP or not,
Right.
it's
Right.
you can differentiate and use their strengths to support those kids in the classroom. But I think just trying to figure out those creative ways to engage kids and keeping them active in your classroom. Some of the kids may need to get up a little
Yeah.
more than others, but you just got to know your kids as well.
Yeah. I think when we were talking about like behavioral issues, one of the things is that a lot of times, like again, because we're post-COVID, right? Social, a lot of times teachers are having to break their academics to deal with behavioral issues. So if you have one teacher in a class who's trying to keep the whole class on board, and then you have these behavioral issues, because then if you're dealing with these behavior issues, that means these other kids aren't getting what they
Yes.
need.
Yeah.
So how do you handle that?
That's very difficult. However, that's where the administrators have to come in and support with the behavior pieces. Also, utilizing our parents again, finding those supports for those kids that are exhibiting those behaviors. That's where an IEP comes in sometimes because they may need a behavior plan.
Right.
So that teachers have that tool to support that kid in the classroom.
Right.
So, you just got to kind of build that rapport with kids. However, you still need to utilize our resources in the buildings to support students who are exhibiting those behaviors.
Right. And the IEP is not forever. A behavioral plan is not forever.
That's correct.
Because
It's not a death sentence. My thing is that if we use the IEP, and I think parents miss the point sometimes with an IEP. The parent really drives the IEP. They're the ones that is the key member of the team. And if they're telling us that my child needs this in the IEP, they need that in the IEP,
right.
they're the driving force. So if they want more resources, they're the leader of this whole process.
Right.
And if they say what they need, then it's our job to provide that support.
I think the struggle is they don't know. They don't know.
It's very difficult, yes. And
Most parents don't know what to ask for or don't know what the child needs, again,
Yes.
because they're not the professional either.
It's definitely a daunting process for parents. And if you're going into it alone, sometimes it can be overwhelming. So again, going back to what we talked about with building that relationship and partnership, walking them through the process is important. Even on the school's end, we should be holding ourselves accountable to walk our parents through the process. I try to, when parents ask about the IEP process, I try to break it down as best as I can to walk them through what resources they may need or what options they may have so that they feel comfortable. Because going into an IEP meeting as a parent can be very daunting when you have just yourself and then 6, 7, 8 other people in the room looking at you. So we have to build it as a partnership and kind of walk them through the process. And when they have questions, we should be readily available to support that.
Now, who helps the parent with the IEP? Like, so we know there's a team, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is there a designated person to walk the parents through? Like, is it the teacher? Is it the, because I know in some states and some other cities they have surrogates, right? That really break down the IEP.
Sure.
They're advocates for the kids, and then
Sure.
they're able to talk to them. But it's not available everywhere.
Right.
So who would be responsible to make sure that this parent understands the
Sure.
IEP and pretty much be an advocate for the family?
I mean, that would come from from the administration, the teacher. We in some schools they do have a designated what you call a special ed liaison who is that go-to person for parents to help break down what the IEP consists of, because there's a lot of acronyms in the IEP that parents may not understand, and just there's so much paperwork involved. But in some districts they have a special ed liaison or a special education director that can kind of walk them through that process so that it's not as daunting as it should be.
Right. So basically, what we're still talking about here is parents need to ask questions.
Ask questions.
What are the resources? What do you guys have to help me make my child successful? Basically, is what they're saying. Just like as educators are saying, what can we do as educators? You're asking the parents to help us make their child successful. So it's the same way.
Yes.
That's how that partnership comes. It's like, what can I help you with at school and you can help me with at home?
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, you just summed it up right there. The more questions you ask, the more questions we ask, the more we can bridge the gap to support your child, the better. I think, if parents ask those questions, like, what does this mean? It's our job to support that parent. If we ask, what else do we need to put in this IEP?
Right.
We're going to put it in. So it's a partnership. And again, the parents are the driving force of the IEP process. And I think I like to reiterate that to parents.
I hear that again.
They are the leader of this process. They have to tell us what their child needs for them to be successful in the school.
I think that's good. Parents, you hear it. We as parents have to drive this IEP. If our child needs, in anything that our children need, we as parents have to be the driving force anyway.
Yes.
We are an advocate for our children. So
Yes.
any area that our children need, we're supposed to be, say, listen here. This is what's going on. This is what we need help with. Because even if the school doesn't have those resources, the school is required to make sure that those resources, or if they have to borrow from another district or whatever it is, right?
Right.
Okay.
And typically, if we don't have it as a district, like you said, it's our job to provide or lead that parent to where the resources are. Sometimes, our counselors do a great job with leading parents to different counseling services, or if their child needs extra resources insurance-wise, our counselors can support in that regard. So there are ways that we can get resources to parents if they ask.
If they ask,
Yes.
we gonna go back to
the more they ask, the more that we can find the resources for them.
right. I think that is like one of the things that we really need to home on parents. It's like ask. No question is a dumb question.
No.
Just a question that's not asked. We don't know everything as parents, so that's why we lean on the experts to show us, lead us, and guide us,
Right.
and not in a judging way, but in a helping way.
Correct. It's a partnership.
It's a partnership. I like that. I think if we just get everybody to understand that it's not me against you or you against me, this is really a partnership so that our children can be successful.
And I think you just hit a button that I was just going to lead with. Parents, may have not had a good school experience, which may have created that barrier between school and parent.
Right.
So again, going back to that relationship piece, building that relationship, making parents feel welcome, making them feel safe in our buildings, can break that barrier so that they are more willing to support us in supporting their child.
Now, do you in the school when you were a principal or even in administration right now, do you guys have like ways to make sure that parents get the resources they need? Like maybe like something like a parent university, or maybe you do?
Well, we're working on, well, that's where our PTA comes in. What we're trying to do with our PTA is make it more like a parent university where we're not just giving information to parents, but we're trying to support them with how to fill out job applications, how to update their resumes, how to look for jobs. So we're trying to like move towards that realm of a parent university instead of just a PTA of just feeding information and then that's it. So we're trying to make it more useful for parents to want to come, so that we are at least building that partnership with those parents.
Right. And then maybe like, because we talked about social skills, right? So some parents don't have those social skills that we're trying to get our children to have. But like even in part of like maybe like in a university where it's like maybe parenting groups or learning social skills, like just more resources to be able to help the parents parent the best way they can. So even if it's not even on an academic level of, right now, academics is a issue because a lot of, this new math, a lot of parents can't, it's different.
It is.
So a lot of our parents really lack the understanding of the new math, so it's hard to teach their children. But even when we go beyond the academic portion of it, when we talk about social skills and partnering and even how parents need to communicate with their children differently, like those type of resources, because again, I think that if you only know what you know, you only know what you know, right? So if you've grown up around people are communicating in this particular way, right? And you don't know no other way. So then that generational thing, right? It keeps going on. Unless somebody shows you, it could be a different way. Not saying that you're parenting bad, I'm parenting good. It's just we parent differently. But for the success for the child, some things need to change.
I totally agree. And just giving them, like you said, giving them those tools, giving them those resources, and just modeling what we want from them. It's the same as modeling what we want from their kids. So, like you said, with the curriculum, we try to build in events to talk about the curriculum and to break it down on how they can support their kids at home. So just having those opportunities for parents to come in and for us to model, the expectations that we want from them and their children, it's the same way that, we want to build with the parents as well.
Okay. In your tenure of being in education, have you seen, partnerships, parents educate, how do I want to say this? How have you seen the partnership dynamic? How have you seen it work? Like how have you seen, like do you have like a story of like maybe I don't know if you encountered, well, we're in the city, so you might have encountered the same stuff before, but like a parent who really didn't know how to parent, right? Really? They lacked the tools to do it, and then the school supported them, and then they got the tools, and now their child is successful.
Sure.
Do you have any of those, like, any that happened to you in this long years of education?
I mean, I would say I have, that's a good point that you made. Like there's an example like that I've encountered in my career, where a parent just didn't have a clue about how to support their child. They were exhibiting behaviors at home, behaviors at school. So we just had to go to the drawing board and just how do you structure your day outside of school? When your child comes home, how do you structure his day or her day? When they come home from that bus to going to bed, what time are they going to bed?
Right.
It's almost like basic parenting, going back to basic parenting again, your kid's going to bed at 11 o'clock. That's why he's exhibiting behaviors at school, because he's tired, he's cranky.
Right.
Does he, what time does he eat dinner? He's eating at 9 o'clock. that's a little late, so
Right.
we just got to go back. Sometimes you just have to go back to the drawing board and just kind of do parenting one-on-one, and we learn together, so,
Right.
we work through the tools outside of school, then we'll talk about how we're going to equip that child at school,
Right.
When he comes to school, we're going to do this, and this. I'm going to give you a call. We're going to check in. So it's just, you have to be creative on a case-by-case basis with
Right.
situations. But the more that we break things down and work in unison outside of school and in school, the better.
I think when I think about what we talked about so far, it is in order to partner, you have to have willing people.
Yes.
You have to have willing parents and willing educators to want to be able to help the child succeed without any judging, any our own biases or anything like that. One of the other questions, though, do you find it difficult to get good teachers in the inner cities?
That's a good point. Yes and no. I say yes because a lot of teachers, want to go to the more affluent districts. One, salary.
Yeah.
But, just the comfortability of not having to deal with high needs students. But then you have a lot of teachers who want to be in the inner city and really want to pour into the community. So it can go both ways.
Okay.
A lot of teachers that have been in my district for 15, 20 years, they want to be in our district
Right.
because they feel like they make the most impact in our communities. They sometimes say, I can go to a Lower Marion or Radnor and work there for 20, 25 years and be fine, but they feel like they make the most impact in our inner city.
I think that's good because you got to have a heart for it. Like we said earlier, you got to want to be able to do it.
Yes.
Because it's not easy.
It's not. It's not at all.
It's not for the weak.
No.
It's
You
not for
definitely, you definitely got to have a stomach for it, and you got to know how to pivot at any given time as an educator, and especially when you're in a high needs environment, because things change overnight. A kid might exhibit something one night, you got to be ready to comfort that kid when he comes to school the next day. So you're always having to pivot at times, but you got to be ready to make that pivot at any given moment.
Before we close out, what if you could change one thing about the education system, what would that be?
We have to pay our teachers. I think teachers are vital to the development of kids.
Absolutely.
And and we're not tapping into the talent that's out there who want to teach. I would just, for example, good math teachers are probably going into the business world because of more salary.
Right.
Good scientists who might want to teach science at school are not coming to schools because they can work at a chemical plant and make twice as much on a starting scale than
Right.
what we're paying at the starting scale in our districts. So I think if we look for creative ways to bring in that untapped talent who want to come into the field, by compensating them, I think the better talent we'll get in our schools, because we do have a lot of people who want to be teachers,
Right.
but it's just like, I have friends who said, I can work at, in Wilmington at the bank and be a math teacher and make way more money than what I'm making as a starting salary for a teacher. So I think that's the big piece, is the salary can really bring in a lot of good talent into the field, especially with post-COVID where we're losing teachers. We have to figure out creative ways to get good people into the field.
Right. And when we talk about salary, that comes from the top, though. That comes from the Board of Education. That comes
Yes.
from the White House, the legislation, the representatives.
Yes.
That comes from all of them because they say what the teachers can make.
That's
right?
true, yes.
I just think it's so crazy that, sports figures and as such, they get paid so much money to entertain.
Right.
But yet, educators are putting all piecing all the brain cells together for our children,
Right.
so that they can be able to go play those sports and do those
Right.
things, and then they get paid the least.
Yes.
And like I said, like you guys have our children 8 hours a day active.
Yes.
So I just think that that's crazy. But all right, so how do we get teachers to get educators to get paid more? How, like, what as parents, what can we do?
I mean, parents can petition to their local senators. They can petition to Harrisburg at the state education department.
Okay.
The more parents we can get to band together, I think can make the most impact. But they have to come in numbers.
They have to come in numbers. Like everything is in numbers. Like if we
Everything's
want
in
change have to come in numbers.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess our time is up. I feel like I could keep going on and on and on because I got a lot of questions regarding education. But most importantly, I think what I want the people to leave with tonight is that parents have to ask the questions. If you don't know something, if you want to know something, really tap into the school district, because even though they don't get paid a lot, we just talk about, but they do get paid to take care of our children.
That's correct.
And that's their job.
That is our jobs.
Yeah.
Yes.
So ask all the questions you need. Email them, text, whatever you need to do to get what you need for your child. Again, like Dr. Pugh said, that we're the driving force for our children. Like we literally have the wheel. Like we got our foot on the gas and the brake, and we're driving. So as we continue to advocate for our kids and to be partners with the educators, like we have to do the work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the more that they hold us accountable, it's our job to come through.
All right. Well, thank you for coming
Thank
tonight, Dr. Pugh. It was wonderful. I think that we helped a whole lot of people, especially when we talk about those IEPs and really what we as parents can do, and knowing the role of the educators. Like you really helped us. You really broke down the role of the educators, and for us to hold you guys responsible.
Absolutely.
So thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in to Parent with a Purpose. I am your host, Donna Janel, where we are here weekly at 7 p.m. on Thursday evenings. Hi, everybody. My name is Donna, also known as Donna Janel, CEO and founder of Parenting with a Purpose. Our strive here at the podcast is to reach every home, whether it's single moms, married, single dads, whatever it is, foster parents, whatever, just bringing the ownership and responsibility and nobility back into parenting. Get comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. All parents need some help and guidance, and I'm just here to be a guide.